Hello and welcome back to another Doctor Who Big Finish audio drama review on the Host Productions. In today's review we are going to be continuing to take a look at the 60th anniversary celebrations over at Big Finish. As in today's review I'm going to be taking a look at the second instalment of Once and Future, as entitled The Artist at the End of Time, as written by James Goss. This release is available to purchase now from the official Big Finish website in multiple different formats, including physical CD and download. Do also note there is two variations available, including a standard edition and a limited edition release. The standard edition is available as per usual and will no doubt also be available from other external retailers, including the likes of Amazon and Forbidden Planet, and there was of course also the limited edition version. Now this was only available if you purchased the entire series within a bundle. It has limited edition exclusive artwork as well as an extended booklet along with extended interviews and music, I do believe, and this was also limited edition to 3,000 units and has now sold out on the official Big Finish website, so the only way that you can purchase this now is via third-party retailers or people who have already purchased the release and are deciding to sell it on. However, the standard edition will of course be available for quite some time yet. I do in fact recommend, if you're someone who is interested in this series, taking advantage of the standard edition bundle on the Big Finish website, because I do believe there is a little bit of money that you can save there if you are interested in listening to the entirety of this series. So previously on the Host Productions, I have already reviewed episode 1, which was of course entitled Past Lives, as written by Robert Valentine. I do believe that review will in fact have gone up not that long ago, so no doubt these reviews are probably quite close together. I did record that review a number of weeks ago on the release of that episode, however then my university assessments hit and I completely forgot to upload the review, so for this month you've got a little bit of a double whammy as we catch up with these monthly releases. Something to also note is that there is no difference story-wise between the limited edition version and the standard edition. The content is exactly the same, it's just the behind-the-scenes stuff which differs. Now, something that I'm really enjoying with Once and Future so far is that both of the stories released have been somewhat standalone. They do their own thing. However, what is slowly starting to emerge is a little bit of a plot arc that ties the stories together. But as we are still in the early stages, both of the episodes kind of stand up in their own right as having different characters, different locations. So you could pick up this story having not listened to any of the others within this series and probably still have a lot of enjoyment from it. So James Goss pens the second episode of Once and Future, entitled The Artist at the End of Time, featuring the Fifth Doctor in the hot seat this time round alongside his daughter Jenny. Due to us dealing with this degenerated version of the Doctor, we see this incarnation as Five, but in reality this is a Doctor who curiously knows exactly who Jenny is. I really like this, as I think it adds a further mystery to this series, whilst also cutting out a lot of the ambiguous dialogue to shield her identity from the Doctor. Given it's a 1 hour story and we already have a character shrouded in mystery within this episode at the very heart of the narrative, this was definitely the right direction to take the plot. Otherwise it would have just been a story made up of lots of ambiguous dialogue and lots of I can't tell you that, sorry kind of moments. Massive compliments to James Goss, as I think this instalment absolutely sells itself as a story in its own right. It feels fully formed, and I also like how it doesn't feel like an absolute fan service focused story. I was really sceptical, as Jenny's return alongside Five felt like it was perhaps a novelty too far. After all, it's quite literally the Doctor and his daughter meeting, and I'm presuming that is why this pairing was probably devised, because Peter Davison is of course the father to Georgia Tennant, so it's a little bit of a funny joke and all of that. I do think that this episode in fact shies away a lot from the fan service. It's less about the characters meeting, but more about the actual plot itself and the big adventure that the characters go on. And again, because they both know who each other are, it's a nice, warm, exciting dynamic, which Jenny helps the Doctor through a rather difficult situation. I think sometimes Georgia Tennant's performances can be very action-heavy, fast-paced plots with drama mainly at the forefront, as opposed to those emotional character moments, and I appreciate how this story is a little bit of a step back from that, and it focuses more on her emotions as a character and her relationship with the Doctor, finding her dad, and dealing with being at the very end of the universe. Likewise, I'm really growing to love Peter Davison's portrayal as the Doctor within the audio drama format in particular. He's a rather emotional Doctor, making this story absolutely perfect for him. Seeing the worlds die at the end of the universe, lots of lovely references to previous Doctor Who stories, and basically the Doctor questioning what is actually the point in anything that he does, because all of these worlds that he's saved basically end up dying at the end of the universe anyway. It's a very interesting story, all about loss and kind of memories and collecting things and remembering things through inanimate objects. The final gallery houses the final known creations in the universe, collated from many worlds throughout time, marking the passing of the universe, and yet both the Doctor and Jenny realise on separate visits that there is a big mystery to solve. The whole theme of art and creation which runs through the entirety of this narrative really intrigued me as a listener. It takes such an everyday thing and adds a catastrophic world-ending context to it. James Goss has a way of writing which I think also makes themes like this very personal to the listener. It's intriguing and starts to do more than an average story, which I really do wish to compliment. I think that this episode does in fact feel like an event. It feels quite special, and it feels like a Doctor Who story that is at least pushing the boundaries and doing something that you wouldn't expect from an everyday episode of Doctor Who, which, let's face it, that is exactly what a 60th anniversary celebratory story should be doing. We've held off talking about him for long enough. We have the lovely Colin Baker as the Curator, a character which originated within the 50th anniversary special The Day of the Doctor, so it's really lovely to have that nod to him returning once again for the show's 60th at Big Finish, and I hope the TV specials with David Tennant later this year also take note of such idea. Yes please, let's have Colin on screen as the Curator, that would be lovely, thank you. Colin Baker really embraces the whole idea of the Curator, and whilst it does provide more context as to who the character actually is, there is still so much mystery that is left untold. The 6C Curator, as we see him within the 8th Doctor Stranded Adventures, but also within this story, is much more personal and much more hands-on. He likes a good bit of adventure, and having a story right at the very end of the universe is perfect for him, but also incredibly personal. Throughout the entirety of the episode, he does feel like a very mysterious figure, that perhaps he does have knowledge as to what is going on, but also I get that sense of a character who's a little bit lost, a little bit unsure, and as a result I found him really intriguing to listen to, and I think that he was by far the most captivating element of the story, and I'm not just saying that because it's Colin Baker, but I do think genuinely the way the character is written is really, really carefully crafted. I think that each and every line is really precise and opens up a new can of worms as to exactly what this character is thinking, but also likewise I think that Peter Davison and Georgia Tennant also contribute some excellent performances. They feel like a very action-packed TARDIS team, and I would like to maybe see more adventures with them together, but I think that that will probably be way too much fan service and probably just a bit too fourth wall breaking, so I like that this story exists, and I think I'm kind of restraining myself from saying that I would want to see more from them in the future. This episode is good enough, but I think that whilst we have them together, it's a nice event, but I probably wouldn't want to see more from them. And as I say, it's not that I don't like their performances or I don't like them together. If anything, they actually work surprisingly well together. I think that they flow incredibly naturally, and I think that that in itself makes the scenes flow in a really nice manner, making it a very easy listen. I just think that any more adventures with them will probably overdo it a bit. Colin makes the Curator feel very mystical. He is again very warm, very charming, but also there is an element of loneliness and sadness, as if time has taken its toll on him. But when the moment strikes, that excitement for the universe returns. It's those little subtleties within the performance which makes distinguishing him from good old 6C really, really intriguing. They're kind of similar, but also very, very different. I'd say the whole idea for the plot for this story certainly engaged me more than past lives, as given that it's only 1 hour in length, I think it really utilises every last minute to deliver great scenes. It's one of those stories that starts off action-packed with high momentum, and then somehow it manages to continue that energy all the way throughout, unlike some episodes that you listen to, which starts off very action-packed and dramatic, and then it kind of peters out towards the middle, and the listener could perhaps risk maybe losing interest a little bit. This episode engaged me at least throughout the entirety of the story, because these scenes kept on cutting away to new different things, constantly keeping me invested. What I will say though, however, is that it does take a while for the artist to appear, which given that he is present on the cover, it could have happened sooner as it wasn't exactly a surprise. But perhaps maybe that helped build the suspense. I think certainly for a while, you as a listener know a lot more than the main characters do, so if that's something that you don't mind, then you'll probably enjoy this story. Whilst this episode is a part of the Once and a Future series, I do also like how the plot itself is very isolated. The arc is sort of the catalyst for the story's existence, but it doesn't dominate the story itself. So dare I say it, if you're a big fan of Old 6C or The Curator, as why wouldn't you be, you could pick up this story very easily without committing to the other episodes within this series, providing you are content with having some of the loose ends unanswered. As for the actual theme itself for the series and the plot arc, I'm not going to go into exact details or anything like that, but what I will say is that this episode continues to build those foundations, it continues to add to the mystery, but I wouldn't exactly say it's 100% crucial to the plot itself. The story works in its own right, and I really like that. This is one of those episodes that I actually do really want to discuss in detail, but I'm purposefully remaining somewhat ambiguous to keep this review spoiler-free to an extent, but I can only do that so far without being annoyingly vague. But what I will say is that what I like about this story is the whole theme of value and the value that we place on things, in particular human creation and the way that people create things and the stories behind them and how much value do we put on that. And I think that the relationship dynamic between the Doctor and the Curator is very, very interesting because we get to see their whole purpose in the universe. And if anything, one of the key themes that runs throughout this story is the idea of identity, people finding themselves, but also kind of questioning why do they do things in their life? What is the main reason why they carry out certain tasks? What do they contribute to people's lives? And why do they stand by the beliefs that they do stand by? So I think that this episode is a rather exciting one when it comes to discovery, especially for our central protagonists. And you know what, given that I also went into this story being incredibly hesitant about the inclusion of Jenny, I also quite liked her involvement within the episode. If anything, she kind of brought that speed and focus that you would come to expect from a new series Doctor Who story, which I think is very beneficial given the celebratory aspect of this episode, and given that it will be getting a lot more attention from a wider audience who may have never listened to Big Finish before. But I think comparing Jenny's involvement within this series compared to the likes of the Big Finish Anniversary Legacy of Time, I much prefer her involvement within this story because she actually has a purpose to contribute to the narrative. It's not just a cameo for the sake of it. I like how she is almost instrumental to the entirety of the episode, but also helping the Doctor get to a certain point within his journey as well. So there we have it, that is my review of the second story from the Big Finish Doctor Who 60th Anniversary Special, Once and a Future, The Artist at the End of Time. Overall for this story, I think it is a very promising episode, and it is kind of starting to move into the more experimental, more out there territory that I was hoping for, that I mentioned within my previous review of Past Lives. This episode engaged me as a listener, it introduced some fun concepts, the characters and main cast very much focused on those familiar faces, which I really enjoyed. I also think it is a very easy listen for those of you that haven't listened to too much Big Finish before. But naturally, me being someone who's listened to Big Finish for quite some time, I'm still hoping that we get to see more episodes like this moving forward. Maybe the stakes being upped, maybe having a few more elements brought in that ties in the whole Once and Future aspect of the series, drawing the plot arc forward. But at the same time, I think this series has certainly started in a rather promising manner, especially with regards to this story. So thank you very much for watching this review. I really hope you have enjoyed it. Do of course stay tuned on The Host Productions for regular Big Finish audio drama reviews, and do of course stay tuned for the next review in this series, as I will be taking a look at the third instalment entitled A Genius for War, as written by Jonathan Morris, which does of course appear to feature the return of the Daleks, the Time Lords, and Sylvester McCoy as the 7th Doctor, so it definitely looks like the stakes are upping, so that'll be a very exciting story indeed. I suppose you can join me for that review in probably a month or so's time. So thanks for watching, have a nice day, and I shall see you all next time.